You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, guys? It is your host, Dialante Daniels and Ed Oliver, back at you guys with another Locked On Wizards podcast episode. For today's episode, we have a special guest, our guy from Locked On Mavs, Nick Angstadt. Thank you for joining us. How you feeling?
Gentlemen, it is great to be on the show with you. As you know, I brought you guys into this world, and now I'm going to take you out.
Yeah. You know, we happen to get busy. Our teams happen to do some business, make some phone calls, get some deals done, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It was a surprise to a lot of folks when they seen that Kristaps Porzingis message pop up on their phone and that notification pop up. So, Ed, let's get right into the first question.
All right, so I just want to know what went wrong with Kristaps Porzingis in Dallas. Is there something that you guys know that we don't know that you guys gave up Kristaps Porzingis for Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie?
I'm not sure it's anything that you guys don't know, but it's something that you just forget about because you try to overlook it, right? It's his injury stuff, right? It's that he's only played in 60% of the games or whatever, like even less than that if you consider his ACL when he first came over from New York, and so it's his availability, and it was always just the okay, well, if Kristaps Porzingis can do this, if he can do this, if he can do this, if he can do this, it's always the if he can, right? If he can stay healthy, if he can finally start hitting his threes, if he can hit his mid-range shot, if he can hit the post shots, and it's just all the what ifs, right? There's so many about him because he is this tantalizing unicorn type player. KD gave him that nickname for a reason because he was one of the few players in the NBA at the time that could space out, shoot the three, that could dribble the ball a little bit and handle, and then can, block shots and play defense on the other end. And so he has all these tantalizing skills, and it just brings you in. It just reels you in at some point, and then you're gonna go through this cycle, right? It's this cycle of Porzingis is playing. Okay, he's playing really well. His defense is better. Okay, all of a sudden maybe he starts hitting some shots. He's a 30-point game. You're feeling really good about him. Dang, we can't even trade this player. This player is an awesome type of player, and then all of a sudden he gets hurt, and then he's hurt, and you're like, dang, that stinks. Hopefully he can come back. But then the injury somehow lasts a little longer than you expect. And so then by the end of it, you're like, oh, well, this is not even a tradable contract anymore. And then he comes back on the court and you go through the cycle again, right? You just keep going through this cycle over and over again. And so it's not anything you don't know, but it is hard to, see the potential in him and then see the actual product on and then mostly off the court and think, dang, well, what, if only he could get to that spot, and you'll just be playing the if only game a lot on this show probably.
Right, yeah, it must have got pretty bad to the point where, you guys threw in a second round pick. Not only did you take Davis, who, was basically on the end of the bench before
Wizards fans were in my mentions saying that Tommy Shepard should win Executive of the Year for being able to trade the Davis Bertans contract, right? Like, that's how bad it was.
No, and they're right. I hope agree.
It may have been Ed in my mention.
Yeah. And then you took on a guy, Dinwiddie, where there was, rumors that teammates didn't even like him. He's a shell of himself. So, for you guys to take on those two guys and do contracts, it was almost shocking to me. So something must just be wrong with Porzingis. And I get the injury history. He's played like 54 games last year and then 48 the year before. Didn't even play in 2019 with the ACL injury. So I don't know if you guys have a trick up your sleeves or something. So that's just why I wanted to ask that.
He had become a process-stopping player, right? It had stopped the Mavericks in their pursuit forward, right? You had, it was Donnie Nelson and his front office that made that trade, and they made it very quickly. And even we just recently learned that they didn't even talk to a lot of the rest of the front office because they, Bob Voulgaris talked about he didn't even get asked about this trade before it happened. It just happened so fast. So they went out and made this trade, and they wanted to bring in Porzingis as that second star. And it just had become going through that cycle that I mentioned earlier, just that cycle of he's injured, he's not injured. He was holding back the team. And on the court, there are times and games where you're like, dang, if he can just be a pick and roll center, a pick and pop center, and he can do these things, if he can hit some of these shots, then all of a sudden he's a real valuable player. But when he wants his touches, when he wants to do the post up stuff, if you have to do those things in order to get him engaged on the defensive end, then are you giving up more than you need to in order to get something out of this player. And it just become tiring for the Mavs. I think we've seen Luka go on the run of his season so far. And am I going to connect it to Porzingis being gone from the team? Not directly, but I think he's playing a little more free because he doesn't have that, holding the team down a little bit. And the Mavs record was just about the same with Porzingis in the lineup as it was out of the lineup. So it came down to that. Okay, well, if all these things are true that I said, and the Mavs can turn one huge semi-untradeable contract into two semi-untradeable contracts that are a little bit less valuable than valued a little less, then maybe that's better for the long-term flexibility. That's really what it came down to for the Mavs.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and this leads into my next question, actually. After everything settled down, after you look at the numbers for Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie, what was your grade for this trade?
My grade for this trade is an F for flexibility. I'm not going on the normal school grading scale, but that's what Nico Harrison, the Mavs, GM, president of basketball operations, said about this trade 6 times after he was talked about it. He said flexibility 6 different times. That's what it's all about for the Mavs. It comes down to that's what they wanted to do. And is there a scenario where Porzingis goes and finally all the ifs become ands, like he does this and he does this and he does this, and not if he does this, if he does this, if he does this. Do all those things come true in Washington and all of a sudden the Mavs regret it? Sure, that could happen, but it was not happening for the Mavericks, and it had been 3 years now that the Mavs have been playing this same game, and so they wanted to move on from it. I'm going to talk to you guys a little later about Dinwiddie and Bertans on how, those guys should fit in, but maybe those guys are, a little bit better. They give the Mavs a little more flexibility, and it turns out to be a decent trade for the Mavericks, but I do think that they definitely took a step backwards on the court in order to take a couple steps forward later down the road.
Yeah, my personal grade for the Wizards, I gave them a B, simply because Tommy Shepard signed the 2 men to those contracts that he had to get off of. And even though that he brought in an all-star caliber player, if he's available to play, he's still, Ernie Grunfeld did this, the previous GM for the Wizards. He always would sign guys to contracts that he eventually had to get off of. And you don't want that to become a habit. So it was a good pickup, risk involved, obviously, but to get off 2 of your worst contracts on the team, that's always good. But you're putting out fires that you started. So I gave it a B.
That's the Jan Mahinmi special, right? To sign a guy to sign a guy to a deal, then to eventually have to try and get off of later. Are you guys bought into Porzingis as he can come in and be like a second star, and he can? What are you guys saying to yourselves about Porzingis right now and buying into it being a B level trade for the Wizards?
I do believe. I think he can be a tease, kind of like you said, where he'll have a couple of games and he'll sit out with a bone bruise for the next 10 games or something like that. But yeah, at 20 points a game, 8 boards, that's what I see from him, especially with this team for the rest of the year. With Bradley Beal being out, he's going to be our number 1 option. So he's going to get at least 15 shots up a game. And he can be somewhat of a defensive. Well, actually,
at least 15 shots.
Yeah, so I don't see him. He's going to get a lot of shots up with the guys that we have out there right now. We got a lot of young guys playing. But yeah, I'm just cautiously optimistic, kind of like Anthony Davis with the Lakers. I'm not going to get too hyped up that Anthony Davis is going to play a lot of games, but we're going to be optimistic with Porzingis. And if he does play, he's a unicorn. He's a talented player. He does things that a lot of 7-foot guys can't do, which is shoot threes and dribble the ball and post up.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I think his numbers are going to look good, especially to end this season, because he's going to be able to really have the green light and be that number 1, not have to worry about a superstar ball handler out there next to him that he has to, basically be second fiddle to. Similar to Kyle Kuzma as well. Kyle Kuzma came over to Washington and he's been producing and he's looked good. He has really looked good. The question is, and I'm sure Mavericks fans felt the same way about Porzingis. They thought, we're getting this really good guy, until he was barely on the floor. So that's going to be the key, man. If the Wizards get lucky and he's healthy, it's going to be great. But big if, at the end of the day, big if.
Turns out that's the case. Turns out that's the case with Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting thing because the Wizards and guys who have injuries, that it always scares me. It just I'm so scared when it comes to the Wizards and guys who have injury history. It tends to not work out because that's just the Wizards' luck and the Washington Wizards franchise luck.
To get a guy that's constantly injured and then to continue to happen. Oh, let me ask you about some of the other guys. So, Spencer Dinwiddie, what went so wrong for Spencer Dinwiddie in Washington? The Kevin O'Connor report that he's a shell of himself and all his teammates hate him, right? Like, what at a certain point why did it get to that point with Spencer Dinwiddie?
So Spencer and Brad, they did not play well together. When Bradley Beal would sit down or he was injured for a few games, Spencer Dinwiddie would put up 25 points a game. Bradley Beal comes in, they play together. He's averaging about 8 or 9 points a game. He can barely move. He was a shell of himself. There's something called a grenade shot. You know what a grenade is, when they dribble the ball to the 23-second mark and then the last second of the shot clock, they pass it off to somebody else and they shoot the ball from half court. And it's basically almost a shot clock violation. Spencer Dinwiddie was the king of doing that. I don't know if he's done it yet with you guys. And then from the off the court standpoint, he said in the press conference that he tried to be a leader, and that wasn't received well. That was tweeted out by a Wizards beat reporter, Chase Hughes, and that went viral because it just showed the dysfunction and the toxicity of the locker room. Some guys try to be a vocal leader. Some guys just didn't want to hear it, and guys were just going at each other. Had a couple fights during the season. But yeah, Dinwiddie, he did not play like he was in Brooklyn at all. He was very slow defensively. Defensively, he was a turntable defensively as well. And he couldn't get by guys. He would get up half court and he would have to turn his back to the defense because he just couldn't get past anybody. He would throw up a lot of floaters. You're going to see a lot of sidestep 3-pointers that would brick off the rim as well. But every time somebody leaves the Wizards, they start to play better. So I wouldn't be surprised if he starts playing better.
Yeah, I think that's similar too. If he plays better, similar to Bertans, I wouldn't be surprised because that happens as well with the Wizards and former players. Dinwiddie, just the fit with Bill, it didn't work. When Bill wasn't there, Dinwiddie looked decent. When Bill was there, Dinwiddie just didn't look good. It would be games where it would be the third quarter and Spencer Dinwiddie has either 0 points or just has like 2 shot attempts. There will be games where he looks like he's afraid to attack the basket and he will refuse to attack the basket. And it could have been because of the knee. It probably was because of the ACL. He didn't want to sit out any games to start the season. And I mean, that's on him. When you're on the court, you're expected to produce. It could get better with the Mavericks, but with the Wizards, no, it just wasn't working out. It was bad. The shot attempts were bad. At the very beginning of the season, it looked good though. We were saying Wizards got a closer. He was looking like the closer, but everything was looking good in the 10-3 start. After that, just downhill.
The health for the Wizards seemed to be a bad thing for them, right? Like they finally got guys all back together and it was like, oh, these guys don't fit. And separately, it was better for them to be separate almost.
Yeah, they got better when a lot of guys went on the health and safety protocol list because it was a smaller rotation. It was at one point, it was like 12, 13 guys playing games and you got 11 minutes, 11 minutes, 11 and 15 minutes. And it was just, guys didn't like that. And players were vocalizing that in press conferences about, rotations, guys trying to get theirs, guys complaining about minutes. Davis Bertans spoke about it, guys complaining about minutes and their role. And it's tough when you got all these guys who want to play and then the minutes are sporadic and some guys get 15, some guys get 11. It's hard to get in a groove like that. Guys want to be on the court. So when that condensed, it got better. And they look better right now. The schedule's a little easier, but they look better right now.
Yeah, Davis Bertans has already mentioned that exact thing in, like when he first got introduced to the Mavericks. I think it was after his first game. He talked about, well, it's hard when the minutes are, you don't know where they're coming from and a bunch of different guys and some guys don't know their roles and things like that. I think him and Dinwiddie both came out and kind of threw shots at the Wizards a little bit. Do you think that those shots were warranted, Ed, or do you think that those were he's just kind of talking out of school because he was not playing well?
Oh, they definitely were.
Warranted or not?
I think they definitely were. Spencer Dinwiddie, I think he definitely wanted to get some things off his chest. Bertans as well. Montrezl Harrell also said some things on Twitter as well. We already know he's a guy that's going to go out there and get his emotions and go on social media and say different things. But yeah, these guys, they did not like each other. I don't think they liked the coach either, Wes Unseld Jr. I think everybody was happy to leave. That's why we were so happy for Dinwiddie to leave and Bertans to leave as well. I think all these guys are nice guys, but just the chemistry and the playing time, it was very, very toxic. It got very ugly. Bertans and Denny got into an altercation. Montrezl Harrell and KCP got into an altercation. Dinwiddie and Bill, they just didn't get along on the court. You could just tell. We had a coach almost fight a fan. Stuff just hit the fan, honestly. It was toxic to the point where we just needed to start over. And that's why this trade, getting Bertans and Dinwiddie out of the locker room and just off the team for Porzingis, we could have traded them for anybody. We could have traded those guys for Max Keebler. And I think all Wizards fans would have been excited just because these guys are leaving. That's how bad it got to that point.
Maxi's actually good, so that would have been a great trade for you guys if you were able to get Maxi. Turns out.
Yeah, it was bad. It got really bad. And the shots, same with Montrezl. When we spoke about Montrezl Harrell and his comments, I'd say it's true. I don't think anybody's lying. I could tell, every fan could tell the fans weren't having fun watching, and you could tell the players weren't having fun playing. And I'm not surprised that guys were complaining about minutes, complaining about their roles, etc., and touches, because it was true. You had a lot of guys and only one pie, and it's hard to feed everybody and have them be full. So I'm sure I was not surprised. I was always waiting for the tea to be spilled when the trades went by, because when situations like this with teams, it always happens. The tea spills, everybody has their shots to throw, but it was bad. It was ugly. Then what he said, he tried to step up. The guys shut it down. They didn't care. They didn't, I guess, didn't like him. I don't know. He's a cryptocurrency guy. Maybe he has a smartest guy in the room complex that guys hate.
Oh, the Mavs don't have anybody like that. No one in the front office, no one in the organization, not even an owner that acts like that. No, they have nobody like that. So he'll be fine. He'll be fine.
He's gonna be a great fit. Him and Cuban are gonna be a great fit.
Say him and Cuban are definitely going to talk. We talked about that when the Mavs almost signed him in the offseason. If they hadn't re-signed Tim Hardaway Jr., they were going to sign Spencer Dinwiddie probably. And so, we joked about, well, is that going to be a benefit for Dinwiddie? Like, would he want to come just because he could talk to Cuban about crypto?
I remember he tried to get something with his currency on the jersey patch or something like that. So
he tried to change his contract to be paid in Bitcoin, didn't
he? Yeah, so I know him and Cuban are big crypto buddies. So hopefully that works out for him on the outside of basketball thing as well. Maybe they can get it popping with, currency with the Mavs as well and all of that. But it'll be an interesting fit, I think. I've been keeping up with the stats to see how Dinwiddie and Bertans have played with the Mavericks, and I will continue to do it because I want to see maybe if it was just the Wizards fit, or maybe these guys, I want to know if these guys are truly washed, or was it just the situation they were in DC? I'm very curious. It's similar with the Mavericks. Is KP going to be available now and dropping all these games and playing consistently? And it's like, where was that at in Dallas these last 3 years? Is it going to be that kind of situation?
Dinwiddie has he's only played 2 games. So it's a really small sample size we're talking about with these guys. But from what we've seen from him so far, he's played incredibly passive. We have not really seen him try to attack very much or try to take over very much, try to do some of the things that Ed was talking about earlier. And now when you're saying he didn't play well with Beal, he's really playing it conservative, playing next to Luka. And at times, Jason Kidd has even played him next to Luka and Brunson, which I think is a weird lineup. And I don't think that they'll stick with that for much longer. But that it makes sense now that he didn't play well with Beal. He was nervous about how that relationship would go. So he's like, hey, Luka, I'll keep passing to you. Like, I'll make the right pass. I'll make the right read. He's really trying to go in that opposite direction, at least early on so far.
Yeah, I think Dinwiddie has an issue with balancing. I felt like he had an issue with finding that balance between being aggressive and being passive. When Brad wasn't there, he was just full on getting my shots up, attacking. When Brad was there, he's like, oh, I want to be more of a facilitator. I want to try to get 10 assists, but then the shooting, you got 2 shots up and it's the third quarter now heading into the fourth and you got 4 points. So I think he always struggled to find that balance. And I think that's mainly because he's not a true natural point guard. That's not what he is, so I think him off the bench will definitely help, where maybe he'll start to get in that aggressive groove and try to put the ball in the basket, because that's what he was good at in Brooklyn.
Let's go back with Davis Bertans. So Tommy Shepard gave him this contract, right? Like, he gave him this long contract. And it was at the time like, oh, okay, he's a shooter, shoots, over 40% from 3. That's the going rate, right? The Tim Hardaway's, the Josh Harris, the Joe Harris's, the, guys like that were getting that type of money. What was it about Davis Bertans that, he proved to the Wizards to give him that level of a contract?
Go ahead.
Yeah. And before we get to Bertans, we're going to get to a quick word from Prize Picks with the.
Yes, we are. Guys, all right, NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and we know you will too. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Prize Picks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from points scored to rebounds, even steals. Prize Picks allows mixed sports entries. You can go LeBron James over in points, and when football comes back, Mahomes under in passing yards. And Prize Picks doesn't just offer NBA. They have options on the college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and more. For a limited time, Prize Picks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 free if a player on your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point, but you must use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use code NBA, $50 for free if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. Guys, I do want to thank you all for making Locked On Wizards your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So, Nick, re-ask that question for us. It was a Davis Bertans question.
Why did they give him the contract?
Why they gave him the contract? Well,
Dude,
he bamboozled us. Yes, he bamboozled us, all of us.
What was it? Just smoke and mirrors? Like, how did he trick the Wizards into giving him that contract?
The clip I always see floating around when a Davis Bertans name pops up, or is that Hornets game, that 2019 Hornets game where he was just insane, and it's like, oh, I hope that guy is gone. I don't know. Maybe he'll come back in Dallas. But that man is gone. He's no longer exists. He does not exist anymore. I mean, maybe you guys will get it. Maybe it was just the Wizards and he'll get back to that form with the Mavericks. But he was consistent, which he hasn't been. He'll have one good shooting game and then a 1-for-7 shooting game right after that. It's inconsistent. It's annoying. So once you start missing your threes, which is what you're paid to do, you have one job. Because that makes the defensive liability less annoying, because you're such a true threat from the three-point line. Nobody really cares about you being a defensive liability. But if you stop making those threes and you stop shooting consistently, it becomes an issue. And yes, he can say all what he wants about the Wizards and playing time. He had open shots still, and he missed a lot of open shots after that 2019 season. Like, he came into camp out of shape. That last season, he came in out of shape. It was just bad. So after that contract, I mean, it was just bad. But great on his agent, though. Great job, agent.
Yeah. Davis, his agent definitely should get agent of the year. Davis, there was a playoff game against the Sixers where he had 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, and 6 fouls. He fouled out of the game. He had a quadruple zero game.
The Tony Snell.
Yep.
Yeah, the Tony Snell type game. So Davies, yeah, when he's hot, he's on. He hit a couple clutch shots in the beginning of the year. But other than that, when he's off, man, he's off. And he's taking some really bad. It's not about him missing. It's the shot selection too. Sometimes it just looks like he's shooting the ball with his eyes closed. He'll come off a screen and just jack it up. So the shot selection was bad. I think with you guys, the shot selection will be better, and he'll get some more open shots because Dinwiddie was not creating a lot of open shots for guys since he was so slow. Luka is going to be able to create shots for him. Some of those corner threes that Davies is really, really good at. And before we had a guy like a Russell Westbrook, we had a guy like a John Wall. John Wall didn't play with Bertans, but Russell Westbrook was able to get Bertans a lot of open shots because Russ is going 100,000 miles per hour. So he is going to get open shots for shooters where we just didn't have a facilitator on the roster at all. So some of it is Bertans' fault, and then some of it is, Tommy Shepard, because he's a one-trick pony. He only has one NBA skill, which is what Wes Unseld Jr. said as well. And he can't play defense. So that's why he collected DMPs, because Wes Unseld Jr. is a defensive-minded coach. And if you can't play defense, you can't make shots, you can't rebound, you can't make assists, you can't,
you're running out of things.
Yeah, so it's like you just have a seat next to the coaches or at the end of the bench. So I think he will play better because Luke is going to be able to spoon feed him and give him easier shots. Same thing with Brunson; they'll be able to give him easier shots.
Yeah, I'm not sure his role is more defined for the Mavericks. I think his role on the court is definitely more defined for the Mavericks, right? He's doing he's catch and shoot, right? Run around a couple screens here and there. I think that's all they're going to ask him to do. But his minutes are probably going to still be different, depending on the matchup any given night, because he is a defensive liability. Through 2 games, we have seen the gambit of him as a defensive liability. With Spencer Dinwiddie, Ed, you mentioned that he's a defensive liability as well, or that he hadn't played great defense. In the great games from Dinwiddie, what have you seen that he's brought to the court on both ends?
The good games, they feel like so long ago. But I do remember the 27-point game he had against the Magic where he was controlling the floor. And he did have a couple games. He had one game where he had 10 points and 0 assists. There was like a streak of 3 games where he had 0. He had 10 assists and 0 turnovers. He had a streak of 2 or 3 games where he did not have a turnover, and he actually had a solid amount. He had like 7 assists, 8 assists, and no turnovers. If you do want to slow the game down, he's fine with that. Getting guys set up in a half-court offense, that's fine. The things that he does well is there were some games where he did have some clutch games. In the beginning of the year, he was super
Celtics
clutch.
Game.
Huge threes, yeah.
Pacers Miami game early.
Yeah,
it was a couple games early. He was
So if you're looking for a guy that's not scared to take a big shot, that's one thing. His confidence, he has confidence. That's one thing. I think that's why he butted heads with some guys, because he does have confidence of an all-star player, even though he's not an all-star player. That's one thing I will say. He's not scared to take a game-winning shot. And actually, at times, he was a better clutch player than Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal would turn the ball over basically almost every time in the clutch. And Spencer Dinwiddie, we had to give him the ball in the clutch in the beginning of the season. He was the guy making – I know Luka's probably going to take clutch shots, but if he has a lot of pressure on him, double team, triple team, I think I would say Spencer is a guy that you probably could rely on to make a big 3 with 2 minutes left, with a minute left.
Yeah, they probably will, rely on him at a certain point. If Luka is double, triple teamed, having him and Brunson on the floor is a big benefit for the Mavericks, which is one of the reasons why I think that they made this specific trade to get somebody like that. They've been looking for another ball handler, somebody off the bench that can play on his own, that can get his own shot, somebody else that can dribble. Just anyone, like literally anyone else that can dribble is something the Mavs desperately needed. So so I think all the reasons you guys mentioned are the reasons why they brought him in, plus the flexibility and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. And I would say some of his lobs too. He would try to throw some lobs to Gafford. They didn't work, but I guess guys like Dwight Powell, he'd probably be able to get them set up with some lobs. So I think he would be he's solid at doing that.
Yeah, I think Dinwiddie beginning early. One thing I will say about Dinwiddie, you cannot speed him up. He plays his game. That's slow, methodical. He plays it. He's definitely confident. Like Ed said, he'll take those big threes, etc., and he'll hit some. He definitely will hit some. He hit some big shots for the Wizards. I think that next to Luka, if he's needed, he can get the job done. I don't think he'll be in that number 2 spot anymore that he was with the Wizards, because he was brought in to be that number 2 guy next to Bradley Beal, replacing Russ. And maybe that was too much for him. It'll be less of that pressure in Dallas. Like you said, they got Brunson, they got Luka. So maybe it'll be a little easier for him. He won't be as heavily relied upon like he was with the Wizards. But defensively, he was okay. I mean, he wasn't locked down. He wasn't terrible. I wouldn't say he was terrible, but he wasn't really that decent either. And offensively, like I said, beginning, he was good. Towards the end, passive. Couldn't find that balance. Just too many issues. And like I said, maybe it'll be corrected in Dallas.
Yeah, and the ACL thing, there was a report that they wanted to let him sit the first 15 games of the season, but they just let him play it out. They did the back-to-back sit out the first or second game of the back-to-back, and then they stopped doing that. Now he's playing back-to-backs. So from a health standpoint, but he doesn't look like the guy in Brooklyn. Like you're not going to get any athletic finishes around the rim or any dunks. Very, very below the rim guy right now.
Which he needed some of that athleticism. And in Brooklyn, he was a borderline all-star that one year, right?
Yeah,
when the Nets were really good, it was like him or D'Angelo Russell who's going to make the all-star game, and Russell ended up making it. But it'll be interesting to see how they get him back to that kind of a form, how they use him, and they don't have a lot of time to figure this out, right? They're really having to put him in and get him into the stretch run. What else are you guys thinking about Kristaps Porzingis? Are you feeling him and Brad Beal are going to fit well together? Because the fit with him and Luka was just kind of odd at points.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. But before we do get to that, we'll get to a quick word from Bet Online. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where their game starts.
Yeah, to answer your question about Brad and Porzingis' fit, I think it could work, definitely. It'll be interesting to see a front court guy that's the second guy on the team, because Bradley Beal, it's been John Wall, it's been Russell Westbrook. His front court guys were Markieff Morris, Otto Porter, Marcin Gortat. It's never really been that guy who could be dominant down there, down low, or in the front court. He's never had an all-star type of guy down there in the front court. It's always been backcourt. So I think it definitely can be interesting. Them in the pick and roll game, I think that could be interesting. I think Porzingis taking advantage of mismatches in the post. I think that could open up more catch and shoot opportunities for Bradley Beal and other guys on the team in general.
Who taking advantage of mismatches in the post?
I seen, because Porzingis did say that, him sitting around at the 3-point line, that's not really, he wasn't fond of that. So I take that as maybe he wants to get down low in the post a little bit more, possibly. But according to Nick, hey, that didn't happen much in Dallas.
You got to do something when you're down there, right? You got to prove that you can actually hit those shots. I watched Porzingis several times get taken out of a game, in the post by Derrick Jones Jr., right? And if you're getting taken out of a game by, somebody like that, a wing like that on that level, that was one of the things that, if he could take advantage of these mismatches, the Mavs can play a little bigger against teams and still have that same kind of spacing. It just never matriculated. It just never happened for him. And you'd see Charles and Shaq on inside be like, big guy, get him down low, feed him down low. It just never happened. He can't take advantage. His lower body isn't strong enough for him to take advantage of mismatches. We saw it a little bit more this season than we did in the past. Last year was just not at all. I mean, he just got completely taken out of the Clippers series, and that's the reason why he was stuck in the corner in that Clippers series last year, is because he couldn't take advantage of any of those mismatches. He couldn't do anything in the mid post or close to the post range, and so that was one of his problems. Maybe feeding him a little bit more in Washington, he's probably going to get some more touches than he did in Dallas. Maybe that unlocks it a little bit, but we're playing the if game again with him.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to ask you, what went wrong in that Clippers series. You definitely touched on it right there, but the fit, pick and pop, pick and roll. Um, I for some reason it didn't work out with Luka, but I think Porzingis is a guy that's going to attract some defensive attention. A double team, if he can get hot and get going, that can take some of the pressure off of Bradley Beal. That 2-man game, getting Porzingis some lobs, getting him to post up in the paint, get some good post position down there as well. And has Porzingis been running the floor well? Because I think we want to push the pace. We got Ish Smith now at the point, so he's a guy that really wants to push the ball.
No, you're not pushing the floor at all with Kristaps Porzingis. He'll hit some trailing threes. Like that's probably some of the most fun parts of his game is, hitting those trailing threes, hitting him for lobs here and there, but not super often when he's trailing and things like that. But the things that when Luka and KP were working really well together, it looked really good. When they had a rhythm, and it was okay. KP screens and then he pops, and then Luka drives a little bit and he rolls back, and then KP dives and he throws a pass to it, like a bullet pass to him, and then he dunks. It's like, oh my gosh, these guys really have something going there. But KP is a real rhythm player. You're going to hear him talk a lot about needing the ball in specific moments, needing his minutes in specific times, needing, his rhythm to get going, especially for his shooting. And when you're just out constantly like that, it's hard to get in a rhythm with anything. And so when those moments came where Luka and KP were actually hitting on all cylinders, it looked awesome. And then it would just end a couple games later because he was out with an injury or, for various other reasons, or he was not hitting his threes or something like that. And so yeah, that's where it ended up with Porzingis. But to elaborate a little more about the Clippers series, it was an entire season of built up Carlisle not being able to trust Porzingis in moments. And so it wasn't just that, while the Clippers are taking him out of this series, let's just throw a player that has been very effective the rest of the season into the corner for no reason, right? That seems like at times what it got labeled as, and what the narrative became, is that Carlisle just shoved him into the corner, a seemingly productive player on all other accounts. That was not the case last year with Porzingis. There were many moments last year where the Mavs just could not trust him, and they, sometimes wouldn't close games with him. They at times weren't closing games with him this year. They would bring him back with like a minute left or a minute 30 left or something like that, but they weren't necessarily closing games all the time with him, and they had experimented not closing with him at all. And so it was just an entire year of pent up, okay, well, we can't trust him in the post. He can't get his own shot in almost any way, right? So if you can't get your own shot, and you can't score on the post that well against wings, and the Clippers, all they have is wings, and the pick and roll stuff is not working well because they're just switching everything, and he's getting taken out by, it just became, that's what he had to do, and that's what Carlisle was kind of forced for him to do at that point. Jason Kidd tried to feed him a little bit more and tried to get him more involved, and so then he became, definitely a better defender this year. That's probably the part of his game that's improved the most over the last couple of years, is he's got back to being a better defender. But the offensive end, it just, last year it wasn't working out at all. He was definitely better this year than he was last year, but that's what happened last year in the playoffs.
Yeah. So to speak on that defensive side of things, would you say he's better at the 4 or at the 5? Where would you have him?
Yeah, his best value as a help defender, right, is coming over and blocking shots. He's not going to be able to defend the Jokic's, the Embiid's, the guys like that. Nobody defends them really, but he can't even stand next to those guys really, because he's just not strong enough. He gets pushed off of his spot a lot. He can stand in there, but he's going to foul and things like that. So but he has become a better rim protector this year against some of the teams that are just going to try and go at the paint. He can stand in there and defend at the rim for sure. For some of the teams that drive a lot, now teams that post up and do that, he struggled against that. So for the Mavs, it was like, all right, well, this is a player we can't play against, teams that are wing heavy or teams that have big, like big centers that are going to, abuse him in the post. And so I was like, okay, well, then where is he actually helping us on defense, right? And it was just against the, the Thunders and the Magics and the things like that he looked awesome against some of those teams. But he's been better this year as a shot blocker. He's moving a lot better. He used to get just destroyed in pick and rolls, and he's gotten a little bit better at that. He's still not going to do very well in pick and rolls against guards and things like that. But as a weak side, shot blocker, help defender, he's really, really good in those areas.
Yeah. So because the Wizards have right now currently, if they put him at the 4, that would move Kuzma to the 3 because Kuzma's playing the 4, and then they have Thomas Bryant currently, but I think Daniel Gafford will be at the 5. So do you need a 5 who can shoot for him to be at the 4? Would you have somebody preferably at the 5 who shoots threes?
Oof. Man, I don't know. The Mavs, that was another one of the problems is there were so many times on Locked On Mavs we would talk about, okay, well, the Mavs, can they go after this player? You know, Gafford even, the Mavs would talk about, can they go after Gafford? You know, he's going to be a free agent. And he said, well, can you play him next to Porzingis? Kind of, not really. And it just became, there's a bunch of different players that you can't really play next to Porzingis. To be at his best, I think he has to be the 5, right? And you're limited in those areas, but he plays his best when he's the 5. And he's got a very mobile player next to him that can defend in space, that can defend, you know, in space and at the rim. Really, he needed like a prime Serge Ibaka type player. And Maxi Kleber was that at times. He can step out and defend, and he can defend at the rim a little bit. And so that's why that duo worked the best for the Mavs when him and Porzingis were playing together. But man, playing next to just a non-shooting 5 like that is going to be interesting. That's going to be a real interesting fit. I think the Thomas Bryant one, if he can shoot a little bit more, is a little more interesting. But I don't think you need a shooting big man next to Porzingis. But it depends on what your goal is, right? Like, what is your goal for as a team? Are you trying to win the title? No, there's no chance if you're going to have that starting, you know, front court. But if you just want to, you know, make the play in possibly, then yeah, that could work.
Definitely. So how was I know you got to interview Porzingis a couple times and got to know him a little bit personally. You know, now with this team, we got to know the guy's character because of the dysfunction we have in the locker room on and off the court. How was he? You know, how was his relationship? Do you think with Luka Doncic, and also, you know, how was he off the court? Just getting to know him. We know that, you know, there's rumors about his brothers that were his agents. You know, did they have any friction with the Mavericks front office? And then, you know, we've seen that he, you know, got into an altercation at a bar a couple of years ago. Is there any red flags or any things that you heard or, you know, seen?
Yeah, some of those things are, you know, the off the court things. There's a couple of red flags, but I don't think that stuff ever, you know, trickled into his on court play or anything like that. The problems with him and Luka were more about jealousy, role on the court, things like that. They were fine. Like they were fine together. They were fine in their relationship, in them being teammates and coworkers, right? Like, you know, they worked together. They were okay with, you know, they were okay playing together. They were not best friends, right? Like they were not what was it, the Step Brothers movie where they're like, did we just become best friends? It's like, no, like that was not them. They never clicked on that level that like Luka and Boban did, or Luka and, you know, some of these other players, or even Brunson, him and Brunson have, or him and Maxey. They just didn't click on that level. And so, yeah, there are some weird things with Porzingis, but he was awesome with the media. Like he's a really good interview. He was a good guy to talk to after games. If he, you know, when he comes in and sits down and talks, he's going to say something, right? He's going to give you something that you can use, and he's going to speak his mind. He's going to be honest. He's going to take the hits too if he plays a bad game and the team does put him in front of the media. I know that, you know, every media does it differently, so it's not always on him whether he's going to come out, but he would come out after a bad game and admit, you know, I got to be better. You know, these things, blah blah blah. And so yeah, I think that was great. The coaching staff and everybody had nothing bad to say about him coming out of it. So that he worked really hard to get back on the court, always worked hard to fit in and things like that. He was excited about the Mavs. He did ask for a trade at the end of last season, at the end of that Clipper series, because of the way that it had gone with Carlisle. But then when Carlisle was out, he decided, you know, it was okay to try and make it work with Jason Kidd. And it worked out better for him, I think, under Kidd than it did under Carlisle. I think he liked him better. And so maybe it works well with Wes Unseld Jr.
I would have one more question for you, Nick. As an outsider, do you think the Wizards should blow it up? Yes or no?
Blow up what is my question? Like what is the infrastructure? Because
see, this is a great question. What? Blow up what?
Well, the Wizards just Brad Beal, right?
Yeah, like the Wizards are an organization that refuses to tank. They don't really go in a direction. Like even right now, they shut Bradley Beal down. So you would think the natural goal is you try to get the best lottery odds positions. And they are more of a, let's try to go get that playing team. Like yes, guys, organizations will say that, but they won't mean that. But the Wizards legitimately mean that. Like, they want to get the play in. They don't want the best odds in the draft, which I think is insane because that's the Wizards' issue as an organization. They float too much around that average level. So when I say blow it up, now, I mean, you can't trade Brad. I mean, that time has passed. Blow it up as in, would you let Brad just walk? Because that's completely just tearing it down at that point. That's admitting to complete rebuild. Your star's gone. Would you let him walk?
Oof, that's tough. He is a free agent this offseason. Man, if I was the Wizards this year, I think I would have just tried to start selling off those pieces. I guess they did with Montrezl Harrell. Maybe they tried with KCP. They did with Dinwiddie, I guess. But start selling off those pieces, and then I think I would make that big move. The problem is that Wizards don't have somebody to build around, right? For all the good that Denny Avdija is, and he can be a really great player in the league. There you go. I just I covered you for all the. I know you guys have a lot of Israeli fans. Shout out to all of you. But I don't think that's the guy that you're building around. He's not like the centerpiece of a rebuild. Rui Hachimura at times has looked like that, but I'm not sure coming back from injury that he is that guy that you build around. He's probably like a tertiary or whatever the fourth option word is of that. And so you got to find a way to get that piece. You got to find a way to get the Luka Doncic, the Trae Young, somebody like that. And I'm not even sure that Bradley Beal is that guy. Are you guys still sold on Bradley Beal being that one guy that you build around on a team?
No, after the 35-point loss debacle.
Debacle, yes, good word. Debacle, yes. the 35 Clippers, man. Those are one of those. Even the Bradley Beal truthers. That was the night. I don't know if you were on Twitter, Nick, where Wizard Spaces was like 2,000 people in there. That's like even the biggest Wizards truthers, the fan base, they couldn't even defend him. I mean, because you're talking about getting all this money, and we're talking about a lot of money.
A lot.
And you can't outplay Coffee and Luke Kennard. It's just, nah, man. I'm sorry. Like, that's not it. That's unacceptable. Go ahead.
This current Clippers team puts a lot of teams in existential crisis, right? Like, you lose that Clippers team and you're like, oh my God, do we suck?
35 points though, Nick, is that don't happen. Like, that just doesn't. The last time that happened was a long time ago. It's just, you can't get paid, expected to be a max player and just be good enough. Like, he was good, but he didn't take over a game. Like Damian Lillard, James Harden, even though he's struggling this season, but James Harden, Kyrie Irving, guys like that, they take over a game. Those are guys that you're like, you just throw your hands up. Like, what do? You can't do anything about it. Bradley Beal, he had a game back in Detroit where he stepped on the half-court line, and that game went to overtime. He ended up stepping on the half-court line for a backcourt violation late game. And that's one of the Wizards fans' biggest gripes with him, is he struggles late games at times, turn it over. So, no, I'm not sold that he's a number one. He's a number 2 or a number 3, and that's what majority of teams are trying to get him to be, a number 3 guy or a number 2 guy. Wizards are the only organization treating him as a number 1.
I'm ready for the sign and trade to the Mavs this offseason. I'm ready for him to turn down the player option, do the sign and trade to the Mavs, him be the second guy. How do you think he would play next to Luka?
I think it will be really good. I mean,
just send Dinwiddie back in the deal.
Yeah, that'll be another great point guard. I mean, he had John, was really good at his peak. Russ, Hall of Famer, and then Luka, looking like a Hall of Famer. So it will be a really good fit. I think maybe from the All-Star game, looked like you guys, him and Jokic, Doncic and Jokic had a little bromance going on. So he could be that guy.
Both Locked On Mavs and Locked On Nuggets did a segment about their bromance, and both sides were like, well, what if they can get the other one? And it's like, why don't they should just fuse the two franchises together. Just fuse Denver and Dallas together, and they'll win the title that way.
Yeah, it's probably because Jokic is summer 2023 free agent?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, so that'll definitely be interesting. But Ed, do you have any more questions for Nick?
No, I think we covered everything. We stole Porzingis, what's left of him, and gave him Bertans contract and Dinwiddie's contract.
Stole what's left of him.
Yeah.
That's like if you were looting and you're just like you're like, I'm just gonna grab as much stuff as I can, and you got home and you're like, damn, what did I even get? Like
Yeah.
pulling stuff out of a bag, going, I don't need this VCR. Like, how did I get
Yeah, definitely. So it's fun. You know, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting on both sides to see how both ends of the trades work out, see who made a mistake, who made the right choice. I think regardless, Wizards made the right choice, period. It's more of a question for Mavs fans to see if it's more of the same with KP or if it's like, where was this at these last 3 years? Is as far as the Wizards, Bertans, Dinwiddie, no matter how they play, I'm glad the Wizards got off of them. But yeah, Nick, anything to shout out?
Shout out to Kristaps Porzingis in Washington. I hope he does well. I hope he has a good career there, and I hope that the games where he plays really well, you guys are going to be singing his praises, and the games when he's out, you're going to be lamenting that you traded for the contract.
Yeah, it was similar. We had that feeling with Russ. Russ was like games where it's like, Russ killing him. He's doing amazing. Then it was games like, oh my God, what is this dude doing? It's so, and it'll be different because it'll be KP is great. KP, where are you? Why aren't you on the court again? You've been gone. I mean, so it'll be interesting for sure. You know, the health stuff, injury prone label, you never know. You really never know. Because I mean, Brad back in the day, he was kind of like an injury guy. Like he used to be injured a lot, like back when in his younger days.
Yeah, we'll definitely try to get the Porzingis rap song that came out a couple years ago in the intro when he does good. We'll try to get that in there. But Nick, we want to thank you for coming on before we do wrap up. Thanks for making Locked On Wizards your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Nick, we want to thank you for coming on once again. You guys can subscribe to him on Locked On Mavericks on YouTube, iTunes, wherever you guys can find a podcast. You guys can subscribe to us on Locked On Wizards on YouTube. Make sure you guys hit the notification bell. And hail to the Wizards. Peace.
Peace.